My name is Thomas Wackley. It's nice to be back. Who is this man? John Snow. Queen Victoria apparently thought him a wonderful anaesthetist. But how did she know? She was unconscious at the time. John Snow died of a stroke, aged only 45 in 1858. But I went on to live until 1862. I was 67. Revenge is sweet. But it's true. I cannot deny it. Our obituary, running to only 3 bitter lines, certainly did not do justice to Dr. Snow's great achievements. But I will just note this one small fact. My friends at the British Medical Journal gave Snow only 2 lines in their obituary of him. That extra line in the Lancet means a great deal to me. This week we publish a Snowfest, an appreciation of John Snow by Nigel Paneth and Paul Fine, whom I am told aspire to be 2 distinguished gentlemen of science. A review of the exhibition on display here at this fine school, whose land in my day was a stinking quagmire of fermenting excrement. We will see if the Research Excellence Framework takes a different view. And we published 12 brief essays from those exemplary, yet credulous disciples of Snow who have spoken over these past 2 days and who have built their perilously fragile careers on the shaky foundations of Snow's legacy. As our obituarist this week makes clear, and I quote, "The journal accepts that some readers may wrongly have inferred that the Lancet failed to recognise Dr. Snow's remarkable achievements in the field of epidemiology, and in particular his visionary work in deducing the mode of transmission of epidemic cholera. The editor, that is the present wretch of a person who vainly attempts to occupy my shoes today, would also like to add that comments such as, 'In riding his hobby very hard, he has fallen down through a gully hole and has never since been able to get out again,' and 'Has he any facts to show in proof? No!' Those comments, published in an editorial on Dr. Snow's theories in 1855, were, perhaps, somewhat overly negative in tone. To be fair, we did not close our pages or our minds entirely to Dr. Snow. His first publication in the Lancet appeared when he was just 25 years old, an admirably forensic report on the effects of arsenic as a preservative for dead bodies, for whom, it seems to me, he had a strange proclivity. He attacked homeopathy and its attempts to present itself as a serious medical discipline, a view from Snow with which I cordially concurred in public. Indeed, I dispute what the nefarious medical historians of today claim. They spin wonderful tales of war between Dr. Snow and myself to bolster the delicate egos of their epidemiological colleagues. But perhaps they should just learn that sometimes black is black, white is white, praise is praise. And the reverence with which we held Dr. Snow was, for a considerable time, not merely genuine, it was warm and effusive. His work on ether and chloroform filled our pages for some years. We supported his early studies when nobody else did, on guinea pigs and goldfish, all the way to the full realisation of his ideas in his most fortunate patients. We gave Dr. Snow ample space and support to defend himself against violent and unjust accusations of plagiarism. We even published his grandest folly, the supposed influence of offensive trades on mortality. And we gladly published a rave review of Dr. Snow's masterpiece on chloroform and other anaesthetics when it appeared posthumously, we wrote this, remember. We have nothing but good to say of Dr. Snow. He was a potent and earnest worker for the good of his fellow men. As one distinguished professor, Sir Peter Froggatt, pointed out in his 2002 investigation of Snow's life and work, this adulatory notice in the Lancet should be considered a full atonement for the earlier injustice the Lancet allegedly committed against Snow. Still, it is fair to note that John Snow received little recognition from anyone while he was alive. His great work on the Lambeth and Southwark and Vauxhall water supplies is rightly applauded and seen as more elegant and harder to refute, as the noble professors Paneth and Fine argue, than the Broad Street pump affair. But of the 300 copies of the book that Snow had printed to describe his findings, only 56 were sold. Snow lamented, "I spent more than £200 in hard cash and realised in return scarcely as many shillings. That's what happens when you pay for publication." The seductions of vanity can overwhelm even the strongest of constitutions. Some say that the treatment Snow received at the hands of the medical establishment of his day has left the epidemiology community with a permanent chip on its shoulder. An inferiority complex that has nurtured a deep and festering wound on the body of that tender community of mathematical torturers. A wound that has to be scratched by those same epidemiologists periodically to remind them that they still exist and have something to live for. But enough. In preparation for this evening of my joyful resurrection before you, I have conducted a systematic review of the literature on John Snow. A fair reading of the totality of available evidence reveals a story perhaps more complex than you crazed hagiographers would like to admit. So let me call Sir Peter Froggatt as my first witness. His independent conclusion differs from the prejudices and lies that you have heard at this conference. He wrote, "There is a prima facie case that the dismissive response of the Lancet to Snow's death might indeed have been considered as appropriate." Ha! Yes, and why does the good Froggatt exonerate Thomas Wackley and the Lancet? Because he was troubled by Snow's voice being used on behalf of some of the most despicable opportunistic industrialists of the time. And I must describe this tale to you a little further. My second witness is therefore the revered scholar of John Snow, David Lilienfield, whose analysis of Snow's darker side was published in the excellent American Journal of Epidemiology in 2000. I am sure it has been much discussed here. Imagine. It is January 1855. The Nuisances Removal and Diseases Prevention Amendment Bill is before Parliament. The bill aimed to eradicate many of the environmental causes of disease, causes that ravaged and ruined the vulnerable and withered bodies of our fellow but far less privileged citizens. Specifically, the bill targeted the pollution emanating from the Grindian industries of Victorian England. Those who own those damaging industries were naturally furious and fearful. Any new regulations curbing their polluting and exploiting tendencies would limit their ability to extract profit from the lives and environments of the poor. The poor, remember, who had no voice and few champions. If the bill was passed, some of the worst offending industries would almost certainly have to close. Dr. Snow was the committee's second witness. He gave evidence against the bill. This is what he said in his opening statement. I give evidence on behalf of the tradespeople, the manufacturers, whose interests are threatened by the Nuisance Removal Act. That is a direct quote from the parliamentary record. Snow began his evidence with his work on cholera. He argued entirely fairly that offensive trades did not assist in the propagation of epidemic diseases. But he went much further, wildly beyond the evidence that he himself or anybody else had accrued. He claimed that these offensive trades were, his words, not injurious to the public health at all. Humbug! On closer questioning, he admitted that the evidence on which he based his claims was shamelessly weak. I have not turned, he said, my special attention to any particular trades. Please recall, Dr. Snow was speaking on behalf of the polluting industries, yet he was forced to admit that he had no direct knowledge of those very same industries. So, the Lancet did indeed attack his evidence. We said it was tarnished by, our words were, vested interests. Dr. Snow was not a spokesman for science. He stood before Parliament as a spokesman for an evil industry, to defend bestial manufacturers that the rest of the public health community were deeply anxious about. I believe these arguments about vested interests are not wholly unknown to you today. Some of you in this room, I understand, have spoken and written passionately about how vested interests damage the trust the public puts in science. You have described how vested interests can lead to manipulations and misdeeds that have profound consequences for the public. What was the effect of Dr. Snow's interventions to defend the rapacious and money-obsessed industrialists of his time? The bill was debated in Parliament, and its recommendations, thanks to the wisdom and betrayal of Dr. Snow, were diluted. Its regulatory teeth were removed. Dr. Lillian Field, the eminent historian, describes Dr. Snow as a hired gun who acted on behalf of these polluting industries. I could not possibly comment, but the facts are these. Dr. Snow was approached by the lawyer representing these extraordinary industries. This lawyer pleaded with Dr. Snow to appear on behalf of the manufacturers he sought to protect from environmental regulation, and Dr. Snow agreed to help. We do not know if money exchanged hands. Professor Jan van den Broeke, my third and final witness, and an epidemiologist of such distinction that he does not work in the flea pits of our universities in England, in an essay reflecting on Dr. Lillian Field's findings, wrote, "The selection for testimony of experts who are known to hold certain preconceived opinions is akin to publishing an unbalanced literature review with potentially more serious consequences." Professor van den Broeke concludes that Snow allowed his scientific reputation to be exploited by an industry that had not 1 ounce of concern for the public's health. And look at the consequences. I have learned on my brief return to this world that there is a study called the Global Burden of Disease. It uses mystical arts that no rational person can understand, and certainly no human being can replicate, to estimate the predicaments we face in our world today. And these polluting industries, what can we say of them? That they cause almost 8 million deaths worldwide. So who was right, my friends? John Snow or I, Thomas Wackley? Perhaps each man possessed a grain of the truth after all. Perhaps each man did what he did, motivated in good faith by his own particular conception of justice. John Snow was a man who, as his colleague Joshua Parsons put it, had indomitable perseverance and determination. He was also a man of eclectic interests. He was a loyal member of the British Medical Association, but we shouldn't hold that against him too much. And the day before his stroke, he had he had agreed to be a member of a magnificently important and secret project, one that was sure to strike fear into the heart of government, a committee to investigate the elusive cause of the first heart sound. But today is the day that we, the Lancet, must make an accommodation with history. The obituary of Snow in this week's issue runs to 2 pages, twice the amount we usually give by comparison to the common and mediocre masses of the deceased, among which some of you in this audience will one day be a part. But that, I think you will agree with me, is only fair. For John Snow was indeed twice the man of most of you today, and we are happy, indeed we are honoured, to correct the record. Thank you.